Dylan's thing was like, don't ask me what it means, man. I wrote it. I don't know what it means. What do you think it means? He was just constantly going, nobody has that discipline at that age.
Bob Dylan is known worldwide for his love songs, yet his own love life has often remained a mystery. He was involved with many women and had several relationships, but there was only one woman who made him admit that she was the love of his life. So, who was she? And why did Dylan keep this part of his life hidden for so long? This is the story of the woman who meant the most to him. A chapter Dylan has never really wanted to go back to. Before we reveal who Dylan once described as the love of his life, it's worth looking back at the relationships that shaped both the man and the music he created. Songs that still move people today. Let's begin with the first. Suze Rotolo, the woman seen walking next to Dylan on the famous cover of the Freewheelin' Bob Dylan. Her influence touched many of his early and unforgettable tracks. She passed away on February 25, 2011, after battling a long illness. Rotolo wasn't just someone who inspired him. She was the energy behind some of his most emotional and honest love songs, including Tomorrow is a Long Time, Don't Think Twice, It's All Right, and Boots of Spanish Leather. So, Bob, why did things change? Dylan first met Rotolo in 1961. She was only 17, and Dylan had just arrived in New York, chasing his dream of becoming a musician. Their connection wasn't just romantic. It gave Dylan a new outlook on life and creativity. Rotolo's strong political beliefs and activism had a deep impact on him, pushing him to bring real-world issues into his songwriting. She was also the one who told him about the horrific murder of Emmett Till in 1955. That conversation led Dylan to write The Death of Emmett Till, his first song of protest. They tortured him and did some things too evil. Rotolo helped guide Dylan's political awareness, encouraging him to refine his message and stay clear of common traps in songwriting. But as Dylan's fame began to rise quickly, the relationship couldn't survive the pressure. Things became difficult, and by the end of 1963, the two went their separate ways. Even though they didn't stay together, Rotolo still influenced Dylan's work. She stayed in New York and pursued her own creative path through art and education. In 2009, she released her memoir, A Freewheelin' Time, where she described life in Greenwich Village during the 1960s and shared her own side of the story. A love that was beautiful but couldn't last. The woman who changed, Bob Dylan. Throughout the ups and downs of his love life, Dylan was always known for keeping his private affairs out of the spotlight. His marriage to Sarah Lownds was no different. Sarah came into Dylan's life in 1964, even though she was still married to photographer Hans Lownds at the time. Meanwhile, Dylan was in a serious relationship with Joan Baez, and many believed he would eventually marry her. So, when Dylan told his tour manager that he planned to marry Sarah instead, it surprised everyone. When asked why he chose her, Dylan said simply, "Sarah will always be there when I need her, but Joan isn't always around." After divorcing Hans, Sarah married Dylan in 1965. Their marriage brought a major shift to Dylan's life. For the first time, he had the stability and home life he had likely been seeking. Their relationship inspired some of Dylan's most emotional and personal songs. He later expressed admiration for Sarah in his writings, often looking back on how much she had influenced him. At first, their life together looked solid. They had children, built a home, and appeared to have found peace. But over time, cracks started to appear. Dylan had trouble handling the weight of his fame, along with drinking and cheating. Even arguments over everyday things like home renovations would spark fights. Despite these problems, Dylan never entirely gave up on the idea of fixing what was broken. In 1975, while working on the album Desire, he wrote a song for Sarah, called simply Sarah. During a recording session at Columbia Studios, Dylan sang the song directly to her, filled with emotion. "Sarah, Sarah, whatever made you want to change your mind?" Sarah didn't react. She sat completely still, her expression unchanged. No matter how much feeling Dylan poured into the performance, she didn't respond. Although there were whispers that they might have tried to patch things up, the separation eventually became final. Later, Dylan admitted that he hadn't been the best husband, but also said that being with Sarah helped him become a more devoted father. The song Sarah remains one of his most heartfelt pieces. Some fans also believe that years later, when Dylan released To Make You Feel My Love, it was a quiet message to Sarah, that his feelings hadn't truly gone away, even after everything. From creative sparks to personal ties, Bob Dylan and Joan Baez were not only major figures in the music world, they also shared a deeply personal and artistic connection that influenced the paths of their careers. Their bond wasn't just a brief romantic chapter. It was the meeting of two powerful creative minds, each motivating the other to reach new heights. Together, they shaped some of the most iconic moments in music, and their relationship became part of the story told through their songs. Their connection developed in the early 1960s, right in the middle of the folk music wave. They weren't just in love. They worked side by side, fueling each other's creativity and taking their music in new directions. Baez played a key role in Dylan's move into electric music, a shift that became one of the defining points of his career. On the other hand, Dylan helped Baez discover her own distinct sound, which cemented her legacy as a lasting figure in music. They started their romance around 1961, but by 1965, it was over. Dylan was the one who ended it. The exact reasons behind their breakup were never clearly explained, though many think it had to do with Dylan's move away from acoustic folk toward electric rock. Baez, who stayed loyal to traditional folk music, felt disconnected as Dylan stepped into a new musical style. Even though their relationship as a couple ended, their friendship stayed strong, and they continued to work together both in the studio and on stage. Years later, Dylan expressed regret for how he had handled things with Baez. In the 2009 PBS documentary Joan Baez, How Sweet the Sound, Dylan admitted that ending the relationship was a mistake. He said part of his reason was wanting to protect her from the chaos that came with his fame. Though they shared the stage again in 2010 at the White House Civil Rights Concert, their interaction remained distant, suggesting that some emotions were never fully resolved. Baez never completely let go of what they had. She captured their love story in her song Diamonds and Rust, while Dylan often spoke highly of her in interviews, complimenting her guitar playing and expressive voice, the same voice that had been part of their happiest moments. The quiet love that never happened. Among all the women who entered Bob Dylan's life, Mavis Staples holds a special place. She wasn't just an influential figure in soul music, she was also the woman Dylan once asked to marry him, only to be turned down. Dylan first met Mavis Staples in the early 1960s, when she was the lead vocalist of the Staples Singers, a gospel group led by her father, Roebuck "Pops" Staples. The Staples Singers had a strong presence in the civil rights movement, and Mavis's deep, soulful voice moved audiences, and it also caught the attention of a rising folk artist named Bob Dylan. In later interviews, Dylan spoke openly about the strong feelings he had for Mavis back in the 60s. At one point, he even asked her father if he could marry her. But they were both still young, and life pulled them in different directions. Although they never became a couple, their connection lasted for years. Their friendship stayed strong, even as their careers sometimes came together and other times went separate ways. In a 2016 interview with The Guardian, Mavis talked about their relationship and remembered the moment they met again backstage at one of Dylan's shows. As they spoke quietly, Dylan looked at her with a familiar smile and asked, "Why didn't you marry me, Mavis?" Mavis later admitted that saying no to Dylan's proposal was one of the things she regretted most. Even though they never had a romantic relationship, their friendship stood the test of time. It remained a quiet reminder of the bond they once shared, a silent love that never completely faded. The marriage that stayed hidden for years. Among all the personal relationships in Bob Dylan's life, his marriage to Carolyn Dennis is one of the least talked about, not because it wasn't important, but because Dylan managed to keep it hidden from the public for almost 15 years. Carolyn Dennis, sometimes known as Carol Dennis, was a talented backup singer who worked with major artists like Stevie Wonder, Bruce Springsteen, and Michael Jackson. Her connection with Dylan began when she joined his band as a background vocalist during the 1980s. It was during this period that their romantic relationship quietly began to grow. In 1986, Dylan married Carolyn Dennis in a private ceremony. Only a handful of close friends knew about the wedding, as Dylan was very protective of his personal life and kept it out of the public spotlight. That same year, they welcomed their daughter, Desiree Gabrielle Dennis Dylan. Despite having a close-knit family life, Dylan kept up his intense touring schedule. Meanwhile, Carolyn continued to build her own music career, choosing not to let her marriage define who she was professionally. After being together for 6 years, the couple divorced in 1992. Even after the marriage ended, they kept things respectful and focused on raising their daughter. Both stayed quiet about their past and refused to speak publicly, even after the divorce. It wasn't until 2001 that the world learned about the marriage, when biographer Howard Soons revealed it in his book, Down the Highway: The Life of Bob Dylan. The news surprised many. Dylan had always been extremely private, and few could have imagined that he had kept both a marriage and a child away from public knowledge for so long. After the story came out, Carolyn Dennis explained that keeping their life private was never about secrecy for its own sake. It was about giving their daughter a normal life, away from media attention. "Bob and I had a private and beautiful family life. He was a wonderful father. And that is what matters most," she said. In the end, their daughter Desiree was the most meaningful part of that hidden chapter, a quiet but deeply important part of Dylan's life. The fading star and the elusive muse. In the late 1960s, Bob Dylan was at the peak of his stardom, while Edie Sedgwick rose to fame as Andy Warhol's newest and brightest muse. During this time, there were widespread rumors about a brief but passionate connection between Dylan and Edie. As with many parts of Dylan's complicated life, the truth behind their supposed romance is still unclear, filled with mixed accounts, speculation, and a sense of sadness that never quite faded. Edie Sedgwick was born in 1943 into a wealthy yet troubled family. Raised on vast ranches in California, she struggled with expectations that clashed with her emotional struggles. When she arrived in New York, she quickly became the city's striking it girl, a symbol of beauty, rebellion, and the wild spirit of a generation that lived fast and burned out quickly. Andy Warhol recognized Edie's unusual appeal and turned her into the centerpiece of his films, making her a key figure in the pop art movement. But as her fame grew, Edie became lost in the same world that had made her famous. The constant partying, substance use, and the emptiness behind the glamorous life slowly wore her down. she became a star, whose moment of glory was intense but brief, dimmed by both visible and hidden pain. Many believe Dylan and Edie were involved romantically between 1965 and 1966, a time when Dylan was shifting from a folk singer to a rock icon. Some say Dylan was fascinated by Edie and wanted to help pull her away from Warhol's darker influence. Although the full story may never be confirmed, people close to Edie said she was truly taken with Dylan. She admired his music, his mystique, and his untamed creative energy. There are theories that songs like Just Like a Woman and Leopard Skin Pillbox Hat were based on Edie. These tracks describe a woman who is both captivating and fragile, caught in the trap of fame that once elevated her. If a real relationship did exist, it didn't last long. A major reason was Dylan's secret marriage to Sarah Lownds in 1965, a revelation that reportedly shocked and hurt Edie deeply. Another issue was Edie's deep involvement in Warhol's circle. She was both celebrated and used as part of his creative world. Warhol is said to have disliked Dylan, and he distanced himself from Edie when she began spending time with people outside his usual group, which only made things worse between them. Some stories suggest Edie truly believed Dylan loved her, and that he had promised to help her leave Warhol's orbit. When she found out he was already married, she felt crushed. According to friends, this contributed to a downward spiral in her mental health. Once her time at Warhol's studio, the factory, ended, Edie's fame began to fade. As Warhol shifted focus to new muses, she was left behind. Her life fell apart, marked by addiction, mental illness, and loneliness. In 1971, Edie Sedgwick died from a drug overdose at just 28, her brief fame overshadowed by a tragic end. Even now, the question of whether Bob Dylan ever truly loved Edie remains unanswered. Dylan has never said publicly whether their relationship was real. Still, the songs he released during that time, Just Like a Woman, Leopard Skin Pillbox Hat, and Stuck Inside of Mobile with the Memphis Blues Again, contain references and themes that seem to reflect her influence. Whether their connection was real or imagined, Edie Sedgwick remains one of the unforgettable personalities of 1960s art and music. Her story, tied to that wild and restless time, is a reminder of how fame can be both exciting and destructive. She remains one of several women who left a lasting mark on Dylan's complicated world. Other romances. Aside from the well-known relationships that have shaped Bob Dylan's private life, he has also been involved with several other women who played important roles in both his personal world and his music. These relationships, whether through love or collaboration, helped shape much of his creative work. In the 1970s, Dylan had a well-known relationship with actress Sally Kirkland, who acted in his film Ronaldo and Clara, which he directed himself. Her involvement wasn't limited to acting. She also contributed background vocals to Desire, one of Dylan's best-known albums. Around this same time, Dylan was also seeing singer and actress Roni Blackley. She was part of Ronaldo and Clara and performed with him on the track Hurricane, a powerful protest song that remains one of his most recognized works. Dylan was also romantically involved with Chris O'Dell, who once worked closely with the Beatles and was a key figure in the music scene during the late 1970s. She later shared details of their relationship in her published memoirs. One of Dylan's longest relationships was with Ruth Tirangil, a former model and actress. They were together from 1974 to 1994, a span of 20 years. Their breakup led to legal action, with Tirangil suing Dylan for financial support. The matter was settled privately, outside the courtroom. Toward the end of the 1980s and into the 1990s, Dylan had a romantic and professional relationship with Helena Springs, a backup vocalist. They worked together on several tracks, including Tight Connection to My Heart and Seeing the Real You at Last, both of which explore emotional themes that reflect their connection. Now, at 83, Dylan is still active, creating new music and performing for loyal fans. His Rough and Rowdy Ways tour recently featured sold-out concerts at London's Royal Albert Hall in November 2024, proving that his age and health haven't slowed him down. His love for performing continues. A new film, A Complete Unknown, starring Timothée Chalamet, is set to explore Dylan's early years in New York and his breakout performance at the 1965 Newport Folk Festival. The movie will also highlight his close ties with Joan Baez and Suze Rotolo, two women who had a big impact on his life and career. Dylan also stays active online, using the platform X to share cultural thoughts, post tributes to figures like Bob Newhart, and keep fans informed about his tours. His online presence continues to connect with younger fans, showing that his influence still spans across generations. When not working, Dylan enjoys music in all formats: CDs, satellite radio, and vinyl. He also has a long-standing interest in boxing and maintains a fitness routine, staying active even in his 80s. Though he remains single, Dylan continues to live life his own way. In 2020, he made music history by selling his full catalog to Universal Music Group for around $300 million. This move came just a few years after he won the Nobel Prize in Literature in 2016, an honor that recognized not just his music, but the literary quality of his songwriting. Bob Dylan's life after the catalog sale took on a new rhythm. He spent less time negotiating deals and more time on stages. He still wrote songs, but he also spoke more openly in interviews. He reflected on his long career and the way his music shaped others. He spoke about the lessons he learned from love and loss. He said he felt lucky to be able to share his work with fans around the world. In the years after 2020, Dylan made several surprise appearances. He showed up at small clubs and community events, sometimes playing solo with an acoustic guitar. He said he wanted to return to the simple joy of making music for its own sake. Fans who were used to big arenas found themselves in tight, near-empty rooms, listening to Dylan's voice up close. The shift reminded everyone of his early folk days and the power of a single voice with a single guitar. Dylan's relationship with Sarah Lownds continued to be a touchstone in his life story. Though they divorced in the mid-1970s, he often spoke of her as a source of strength during his early rise. He told interviewers that Sarah helped him see the world in new ways. He said she brought out a side of him that he had not known before. He did not speak much about his later partnerships in public, but those who knew him well said he still carried memories of his romances in his heart. In private, Dylan kept a tight circle of close friends. He did not marry again, but he stayed open to new connections. He often invited musicians and writers to his home for informal gatherings. He would pick up a guitar at odd hours and play a new melody he was working on. Those sessions sometimes turned into songs that appeared on later albums. He did not plan these collaborations in a formal way. He let them grow naturally, much like the jams in Greenwich Village in the 1960s. Dylan also returned to painting. He had experimented with visual art in his youth, but set it aside as his music career took off. After the catalog sale, he bought a small studio in Malibu, where he tried different techniques. He painted landscapes, portraits, and scenes drawn from his memories. He held a private show of his work in 2022. Fans who saw the paintings noted that they shared the same sense of mood and color as his songs. Some pieces even bore titles that echoed verses from his lyrics. Though he rarely used social media, Dylan embraced new technology in subtle ways. He released a series of deep-cut performances on streaming platforms. These were solo takes on songs he had not played in decades. He also agreed to have his archives digitized. For the first time, students and scholars could explore his drafts, notes, and outtakes. Dylan said he hoped this would help people understand how his songwriting process evolved. He wanted to show the rough sketches behind the final work. By 2024, Dylan's tours began to feature acoustic sets mixed with a small band. He chose songs from every era of his career. He played early folk tunes alongside electric rock anthems, country ballads, and spoken word pieces. He said he did this to remind himself and his audience of how varied his interests had been. He did not favor one phase over another. Each song he performed held its own place in his story. In recent interviews, Dylan spoke about aging and creativity. He said he did not feel old in the usual sense. He felt that, as long as he could hold a guitar and hear sound, he was still growing. He rejected the idea that artists must slow down after a certain age. He pointed to Leonard Cohen and others who produced great work late in life. Dylan said he had more stories to tell and more songs to write. Dylan's health remained a private matter. He acknowledged in one radio interview that he had faced challenges. He credited his workout routine and a diet he adapted over the years. He also credited regular checkups and the support of close friends. He did not share details, but he said he felt fortunate to be able to stand on stage and sing. He saw every show as an opportunity to connect and to thank fans for their loyalty. Looking ahead, Dylan teased a project that would blend music, film, and art. He said he was exploring ways to tell his story through different media. He mentioned a possible documentary that would feature his paintings and interviews with collaborators. He said the goal was to create an immersive experience, one that would give people a fresh look at his life's work. He did not set a release date, but he promised it would arrive when it was ready. As Dylan moves into his mid-80s, his personal chapters remain open. He still finds new ways to express himself. He still draws from the well of experience that began in Hibbing, Minnesota. He still surprises people with a song or a painting that feels deeply familiar, yet entirely new. In a career that spans 6 decades, Dylan has always been ready to turn the page. He has shown that art can evolve, that love can inspire, and that the stories we tell ourselves can guide us into the next act. What might the next chapter hold? Only Dylan knows. But one thing is clear. His life, like his music, remains a work in progress. And those who have followed him this far know that there is always another verse, another painting, another quiet moment waiting to be shared. Dylan's rare mix of romance, music, and longevity has secured his status as one of the most enduring figures in modern culture. But what are your thoughts on Dylan's romantic history and where his story is headed next? Did you know he once called Sarah Lownds the greatest love of his life, and even left Joan Baez for her? Let us know what you think in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the lives of iconic artists.